To become a professional footballer, you need to have something special. You need to first make it into the academy, and in England, the chance that you will ever make it into the first team is only 0.012%. However, in Brazil, things are even tougher. But in comes Carlos Henrique Raposo, or more commonly known as Carlos Kaiser, a guy who realized that he does not have what it takes, but still somehow ended up having a career that lasted 13 years. Welcome to UW Football, and today we will be talking about Carlos Kaiser, a guy who conned his way into having a 13-year-long professional footballing career. Carlos Henrique Raposo was born on 2nd April 1963 in Rio Pardo, Brazil. His early life was much like any other young Brazilians, other than the fact that he was kidnapped and taken to Rio de Janeiro in the 70s. Or so he claims, because the line between the truth and fiction is not always clear when it comes to stories being told to us by Raposo himself. As a child, he would be found playing in the favelas. He even earned himself the nickname Kaiser, as he played and looked like the German legend Franz Beckenbauer. Well, this is just another claim by him. Others say that he was called Kaiser because he looked like a beer bottle. In his early teens, Carlos Kaiser realized that he does not have what it takes to make it at the top. He knew that the only way that he can become a professional is if he uses his charismatic personality and storytelling abilities into earning himself contracts at various different clubs. Now, before I get into his legendary career, I need to preface this one thing. He was a player that played before internet was a thing and medical technologies weren't as good as they are these days. So there was no way into looking into his stories without spending a very hefty amount. So let's see where it all began for him. At the age of 16, he signed with Puebla in Mexico. He got that contract solely because he was an academy player at Botafogo and Flamengo, two Brazilian giants. Will said Puebla, that's where we first saw his go-to trick into avoiding to play for the senior team. Whenever he was close to being called into action, a mysterious muscle twinge would occur, and he would then be sent to the medical room, a place that he wanted to be at. 1 year of constant injuries meant that Puebla had had enough of Kaiser, and they terminated his contract. After his stint at Puebla, he then returned to Brazil, and then 2 years later somehow managed to land himself a contract with both Botafogo and Flamengo. He made a move up in his career even though he had basically failed in Mexico. How on earth did he manage to do that? Well, he claimed that he was playing for Independiente over the last 2 years, and since Botafogo and Flamengo both had him in their academies, they bought his lie. This and the fact that he was friends with actual pros like Bebeto, Carlos Alberto, and Renato Gaucho made his story seem legit. Question: why on earth did these footballers associate themselves with him? Well, it was because he was a great storyteller, and because of that he was also a womanizer. And at nightclubs, he was a very useful ally for these guys. Now let's get back to his on-field career. Now that both Botafogo and Flamengo had terminated his contract within a year, well, because he was constantly injured, he did not play for another Brazilian club for 4 years. His reasoning behind it was because he was rocking it in France. He was telling stories as to how successful he was and how he was the top scorer in Ligue 1 the previous year. And in order to legitimize his story, he had also befriended various different journalists who wrote stories confirming his lies. They also wrote stories that Carlos Kaiser was very successful in Mexico with Puebla, so much so that they had offered him citizenship so he can play for the Mexico national team. Using these stories as his proof, he frauded his way into signing with Bangu. a club that was owned by the notorious gang leader Castor de Andrade. Not a guy that you want to mess with, but Kaiser did. And he got away with it for a few months. That was until De Andrade demanded that Kaiser to be named in the first team. Kaiser tried to talk to the manager into dropping him as he was injured, but De Andrade was having none of it. He told Kaiser that he would only be on the bench and his injury was not a problem. And you guessed it right, this was just a story that De Andrade told Kaiser just so he turns up to the game. In the game, Bangu were 2-0 down. Kaiser, the top scorer in France, was told to come on. In his warm-up, he saw only one way out. He started fighting with a fan, claiming that the fan was abusing him. This incident saw him get sent off and he once again avoided going on the pitch. De Andrade was fuming. He brought his entire gang into the dressing room just so he could beat up Carlos Kaiser, but Kaiser once again talked his way out of it. He told De Andrade that he was like a father to him and that he had only fought the fans just so he could save his honor, as they had been accusing De Andrade of being a crook and a criminal. This story won the gang leader over and he awarded him with a new 6-month contract. Again, Kaiser never played for the team and this time around he was let go. He then returned to his old tricks and joined Vasco da Gama. He was initially signed to help a recovering alcoholic in the team. During that time, he would often be seen using mobile phones where you could hear him turning down offers from other teams, and he was showing his gratitude to Vasco da Gama. But this scam lasted only a few months when he was caught faking it by the assistant. So it was now time for a new challenge for him. He then went over to America, even played for a newly founded team there. Then he went to Japan, played for a few teams there, then came back to Brazil, signed for 2 more teams, and then retired at the age of 30 because the injuries had taken a toll on him. He used this just so he could land himself a contract with Mesa Redonda, Brazil's equivalent of Match of the Day. He worked as an analyst on that show. Of the clubs that he has supposedly played for, his time in Japan was definitely fake. A player at Ajaccio, a French team that Kaiser claimed to have played for, claims that Kaiser had never actually set foot in the football club at all, and all his stories about France were also lies. In the time that he had claimed to have played for Independiente, he would have been 12 years old, so that story was also fake. He was the greatest conman to have ever played the game. A perfect example of if you cannot make it, then fake it. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, and I will see you soon.